SpaceX to partner with T-Mobile for connectivity, NASA seeks vertical solar arrays for the moon, and a citizen scientist produces great views of Jupiter. This and much more on today's WSN Space Newscast.
Three, two, 1, 0.
Now, here is World Spaceflight News Editor, Randall Schutler.
Greetings and welcome to today's broadcast. We open up with some news about Starlink and Starship. A booster with a full complement of 33 Raptor engines has been lifted onto the orbital launch mount at Starbase. Musk tweeted this photo of the chopsticks, as they are called, hauling the giant rocket onto its pad. Notably, he calls this booster Starship. Usually the booster first stage is called Super Heavy, while the upper stage is referred to as Starship. In another development, Musk tweets, "This is something special." Musk and the CEO of phone company T-Mobile, Mike Sievert, will appear at a joint announcement about a new connectivity plan on Thursday at 8 p.m. The event will be live streamed by SpaceX on YouTube and held at Starbase. The details of the new partnership with T-Mobile are the subject of industry speculation. The phrasing of the announcement would seem to rule out something as mundane as a joint marketing campaign. The website Drive Tesla Canada reports that SpaceX has applied to the FCC for permission to run a mobile satellite service that doesn't rely on cellular towers, a boon for underserved rural customers. They further say that the SpaceX acquisition of a small satellite company named Swarm might play a role. There's a link to their story in the description. The contractor for the Orion vehicle has developed a smartphone app available on Google Play and Apple. Called Explore Orion, it features some neat animations, factoids, trivia, and a message system which interfaces with the Callisto technology demonstration. Callisto is a crew interface using Amazon's Alexa and visual communications through WebEx by Cisco. You can submit comments which Lockheed says will be displayed on Callisto's screen throughout the mission, and replays will be made public so you can see your comment in space. When you enter your message, which is limited to 120 characters, you'll see this disclaimer. Quote, "Upon submission, your message will be reviewed. Messages with derogatory, defamatory, racist, sexist, or otherwise inappropriate content will be automatically rejected. Messages including copyrighted materials or that endorse any persons, products, brands, etc. will also be automatically rejected. So watch out what you type and be nice." Regardless of your feelings about the implementation of this mission, please consider that many thousands of hard workers across the globe have a stake in its outcome, and they deserve our respect and admiration. Today we present our first in-depth look at one of the 10 Cubesat science satellites carried aboard the SLS rocket. The tiny satellites are technology demonstrations. They ride inside the Orion Stage Adapter OSA, located between the interim cryogenic propulsion upper stage and the Orion surface module. Omotenashi is a project of the Japanese Space Agency and is particularly interesting. Scientists hope that it will perform a controlled landing on the moon, becoming the smallest craft ever to land there. We corresponded with Dr. Tatsuaki Hashimoto of JAXA, who graciously allowed us to use the agency's animation of the lunar landing attempt. It was one of the 5 satellites that was successfully recharged while awaiting launch inside the rocket.
Omotenashi stands for Outstanding Moon Exploration Technologies demonstrated by Nano Semi-Hard Impactor. It was developed by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA, with the University of Tokyo. While Omotenashi is one of several Artemis 1 secondary payloads that are studying the Moon, it is the only one that will conduct a controlled landing on the Moon's surface. Its primary objective is to test the technologies and trajectory maneuvers that allow a small lander to land on the Moon while keeping its systems, including power, communication, and propulsion systems, intact. Testing these systems around and on the Moon can help with development of similar small landers that could explore other planets. The spacecraft will also measure the radiation environment beyond low Earth orbit, providing data that will help develop technologies to manage radiation exposure for human exploration. If successful, Omotenashi will be the smallest spacecraft ever to land on the lunar surface and will mark Japan as the fourth nation to successfully land on the Moon. Omotenashi is a 6U CubeSat, 10 by 20 by 30 centimeters, with a mass of approximately 14 kilograms. It comprises a small surface probe, a retromotor module, and an orbit module. The surface probe has an inflatable airbag and shock absorption system comprising crushable material and an epoxy filling, designed to allow survival in surface impacts at target speeds of 50 meters per second vertical and 100 meters per second horizontal, corresponding to a few hundred meters of lunar freefall. It has a P-band transponder for communications and an 18 watt-hour lithium battery for power. The retromotor module contains a 500 Newton solid rocket motor capable of about 2,500 meters per second deceleration and forms the core of the CubeSat. The orbit module guides the spacecraft trajectory. It also carries a radiation monitor. Spacecraft attitude is maintained with 425 millinewton axial thrusters using our 236FA propellant. The total mass of propellant is 0.74 kilograms, stored in a 589 milliliter tank. Fine control is achieved by 3 reaction wheels. Positional knowledge is via a star tracker, for sun sensors, and a 3-axis IMU. Spacecraft power is provided by body-mounted solar cells and batteries. Attitude control is via cold gas jets mounted on either side of the solid rocket motor. Mission profile: after separation from the SLS, Omotenashi will make a single maneuver, a lunar impact orbit, combining lunar orbit insertion and descent. The CubeSat then spins up and the airbag is inflated. At the end of the descent phase, the orbit module is jettisoned and the solid rocket motor is fired, bringing the spacecraft almost to a vertical standstill at an altitude of 100 to 200 meters. The surface probe is then released and makes a free fall to the lunar surface, impacting at a shallow angle at roughly 30 meters per second vertical velocity and under 100 meters per second horizontal. The airbags and shock absorption mechanism are designed to ensure a survivable landing. Following the semi-hard landing, the project hopes that the craft lives for 6 minutes or more to radio back landing data.
Here's a fantastic visualization of what Artemis astronauts can expect to see from the South Polar region of the Moon. It was produced by NASA's Scientific Visualization Studio by Ernie Wright. This visualization shows the unusual motions of the Earth and Sun as viewed from the south pole of the Moon. The animation compresses 3 months, a little over 3 lunar days, into 2 minutes. The virtual camera is on the rim of Shackleton Crater, partially visible in the bottom right, and is aimed at the Earth. The mountain on the horizon, about 85 miles away, is unofficially known as Mons Malapert. Here, the sun glides around the horizon never more than 1.5 degrees above or below it, while the Earth bobs up and down, never veering far from the 0-degree longitude. The Earth appears to be upside down and rotating backwards. The perpetually low sun angle produces extremely long shadows that rotate across the rugged lunar terrain. In the second month of the visualization, the Earth passes in front of the Sun, creating an eclipse. For observers on Earth, this is a lunar eclipse in which the Moon passes through the shadow cast by the Earth. Viewed from the Moon, however, this is an eclipse of the Sun. The second visualization from the same studio shows the shadows near the pole. As we just saw at the Moon's north and south poles, the Sun is never more than 1.5 degrees above or below the horizon. The pattern of daylight and shadows is unlike anything elsewhere on the Moon or the Earth. After zooming in on a small lunar highland near the South Pole, this visualization recreates the illumination conditions there over a period of 2 lunar days equal to 2 months on Earth. This close to the pole, the sun doesn't rise and set. Instead, the Moon rotates on its axis, the sun skims the horizon, traveling a full 360 degrees around the terrain. Mountains as far as 75 miles away cast shadows across the landscape. With the sun at such a low angle, it can never reach the floors of some deep craters. Places the sun never reaches are known as permanently shadowed regions. They are the locations of some of the coldest spots in the solar system, and because of that, they trap volatile chemicals, including water ice, that would immediately sublimate, transform directly from a solid to a gas, in the harsh, airless sunshine that falls in most other places on the Moon. The sun appears to travel in a circle at the Earth's poles, too, but it also travels through a range of altitudes. From the spring equinox to summer solstice, for example, the sun is climbing higher in the sky, reaching an altitude of 23.4 degrees. It only hugs the horizon for a few days around the equinoxes. At the Moon's poles, the sun is always near the horizon, and the shadows are perpetually long, sweeping across the surface with changing solar azimuth. Solar power in space and microchips are in the space news basket today. First, NASA has selected 3 companies to further advance work on deployable solar array systems for exploration of the Moon under Artemis. The awards total $19.4 million. Astrobotic and Lockheed Martin each received $6.2 million, while Honeybee Robotics got $7 million. The vertical solar arrays can autonomously deploy up to 32 feet high and retract for relocation if necessary. Chuck Taylor is the Vertical Solar Array Technology VSAT project manager at NASA's Langley Research Center. The goal is to deploy one of the systems near the moon's south pole near the end of the decade. The designs must remain stable on sloped terrain and be resistant to abrasive lunar dust, all while minimizing both mass and stowed volume to aid in the system's delivery to the lunar surface. Existing space-rated solar array structures are designed for use in microgravity or for horizontal surface deployment. The vertical orientation and height of these new designs will help prevent loss of power at the lunar poles where the sun does not rise very far above the horizon. When the sun is low on the horizon, the moon's terrain can block some of its light, keeping it from reaching solar arrays that are low to the ground. By placing the solar arrays on tall masts, these designs allow for uninterrupted light and therefore produce more power. Honeybee is partnering with M-Power, headquartered in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to use their unique Dragon Scales solar array technology. This is an advanced design consisting of small, highly interconnected photovoltaic cells initially developed at the Sandia National Laboratories. The design, called Solar Glitter, was announced by Sandia in 2009 after they were fabricated by researchers using technologies to fabricate microelectromechanical systems in Sandia's Microsystems Engineering, Science, and Applications facility, giving it the nickname MEPV for Microsystem-Enabled Photovoltaics. Murat Okandan, one of the researchers who developed the technology, left Sandia through the Entrepreneurial Separation to Technology Transfer program and founded M-Power. In 2017, Solar Glitter was licensed to M-Power. While the technology could be applied to a variety of devices for any shape, the company is focused on the space market and rapidly deployable portable solar power systems. The first satellite to use the technology was launched in 2021. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory has selected microchip technology of Chandler, Arizona, to develop a high-performance spaceflight computing HPSC processor that will provide at least 100 times the computational capacity of current computers. The contract is valued at $50 million and will last 3 years. Microchip will contribute R&D costs to complete the work. The company is traded on the NASDAQ as MCHP and reported nearly $7 billion in revenue with $1.3 billion income ending in March of this year. They have wafer fabs in Arizona, Oregon, and Colorado. Although not well known to consumers, they produce a wide array of specialized microcontrollers, memory devices, and other integrated circuits. Microchip will architect, design, and deliver the HPSC processor with the goal of employing the processor on future lunar and planetary missions. Microchip's architecture will significantly improve the computing efficiency for these missions by enabling computing power to be scalable based on mission needs, to be more reliable, and have a higher fault tolerance. Current space-qualified computing technology is designed to address the most computationally intensive part of a mission, a practice that leads to over-designing and inefficient use of computing power. A Mars surface mission, for example, demands high-speed data movement and intense calculation during the planetary landing sequence. However, routine mobility and science operations require fewer calculations and tasks per second. Microchip's processor architecture offers the flexibility for the processing power to ebb and flow depending on current operational requirements. Certain processing functions can also be turned off when not in use, reducing power consumption. This capability will save a large amount of energy and improve overall computing efficiency. European Space Agency Director General Josef Aschbacher announced on August 16th that the agency will seek funding for a preliminary study into the feasibility of space-based solar power (SBSP) satellites under a program named Solaris. The proposal will be presented at the upcoming ESA Council at ministerial level in November. ESA has undertaken 2 cost-benefit studies on SBSP for terrestrial energy needs, together with the consulting firms Roland Berger and Fraser Nash. These 2 studies were completed this month. Here is a video produced by ESA explaining the initiative.
The sun, the source of energy for life on Earth. Stored in fossil fuels, the sun's energy has powered modern civilization for over 200 years. But the use of fossil fuels has resulted in dangerous global warming and a changing climate, to the extent that the United Nations and the European Union have declared a climate emergency. Transitioning to clean energy is an urgent imperative, and Europe is committed to achieving net zero emissions by the year 2050. But this will be extremely difficult if we rely only on existing renewable and low-carbon energy solutions, as intermittency of supply, pressures on land use, scalability and toxic waste limit how quickly and effectively existing energy sources can be rolled out. The European Space Agency has been investigating a new solution that could overcome all these problems. Solar power delivered wirelessly from space to Earth. Europe has the technology lead in building and launching communication satellites. This deep know-how can be built upon to develop and scale up solar power satellites. Huge orbiting solar farms, built up of many similar parts that will be mass-produced, launched into space on low-cost, reusable launchers, and assembled together in orbit using advanced robotic techniques. Once completed, these satellites will collect the full power of the sun's energy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and beam it wirelessly down to Earth to receiver stations, which will turn it back into electricity and deliver it to the grid. Space-based solar power is thus a continuously available, inexhaustible, sustainable and scalable source of energy that could help Europe meet its climate and energy security goals. This is not science fiction. The fundamental technologies are understood and are already being demonstrated on Earth and in space today. However, there are still many engineering and policy challenges that would need to be overcome to make this ultimate energy source a reality as early as the next decade. Other nations are already working on realizing space-based solar power. If Europe also wants to benefit from this game-changing capability, accelerated investments in research and development would need to start now to determine if space-based solar power can indeed offer another source of affordable and abundant energy for our green future. And in doing so, launch a new European space energy industry that would provide enormous opportunities for innovation and economic growth in space and on Earth.
And now in astronomy news, we have spectacular new images from the Webb Space Telescope. With giant storms, powerful winds, auroras, and extreme temperatures and pressure conditions, Jupiter has a lot going on. Now, NASA's Webb telescope has captured new images of the planet. The Jupiter observations will give scientists more clues to Jupiter's inner life. Quote, "We hadn't really expected it to be this good, to be honest," said planetary astronomer Imke de Peter, professor emerita of the University of California, Berkeley. He led the observations of Jupiter with Thierry Fouché, a professor at the Paris Observatory, as part of an international collaboration for Webb's early release science program. Quote, "It's really remarkable that we can see details on Jupiter together with its rings, tiny satellites, and even galaxies in one image." The two images seen here come from the observatory's near-infrared camera, NIRCam, which has 3 specialized infrared filters that showcase details of the planet. Since infrared light is invisible to the human eye, the light has been mapped onto the visible spectrum. Generally, the longest wavelengths appear redder, and the shortest wavelengths are shown as more blue. Scientists collaborated with citizen scientist Judy Schmidt to translate the Webb data into images. In the standalone view of Jupiter, created from a composite of several images from Webb, auroras extend to high altitudes above both the north and south pole of Jupiter. The auroras shine in a filter that is mapped to redder colors, which also highlights light reflected from lower clouds and upper hazes. A different filter, mapped to yellows and greens, shows hazes swirling around the northern and southern poles. A third filter, mapped to blues, showcases light that is reflected from a deeper main cloud. The Great Red Spot, a famous storm so big it would swallow Earth, appears white in these views, as do other clouds because they are reflecting a lot of sunlight. Quote, "The brightness here indicates high altitude, so the Great Red Spot has high altitude hazes, as does the equatorial regions," says Heidi Hamel, Webb interdisciplinary scientist for solar system observations. The numerous bright white spots and streaks are likely very high altitude cloud tops of condensed convective storms. By contrast, dark ribbons north of the equatorial region have little cloud cover. The wide field view showcases Jupiter. The planet's swirling horizontal stripes are rendered in blues, browns, and cream. Electric blue auroras glow above Jupiter's north and south poles. A white glow emanates out from the auroras. Along the planet's equator, rings glow in a faint white. At the far left edge of the rings, a moon appears as a tiny white dot. Slightly further to the left, another moon glows with tiny white diffraction spikes. The rest of the image is the blackness of space, with faintly glowing white galaxies in the distance. Also shown are Jupiter's faint rings, which are 1,000,000 times fainter than the planet, and 2 tiny moons. The fuzzy spots in the lower background are likely galaxies photobombing this Jovian view. Data arrives at the Space Telescope Science Institute, STSCI, and is then processed into calibrated files and delivered to the Mikulski Archive for Space Telescopes for dissemination. Scientists then translate that information into images. While a team at STSC formally processes Webb images for official release, citizen scientists often dive into the archive. Judy Schmidt of Modesto, California, a longtime image processor, processed these views. For the image that includes the tiny satellites, she collaborated with Ricardo Huzo, a co-investigator on these observations, who studies planetary atmospheres at the University of the Basque Country in Spain. An example of her work is Minkowski's butterfly, a planetary nebula. Schmidt has no formal educational background in astronomy. But 10 years ago, an ESA contest sparked her insatiable passion for image processing. The Hubble's Hidden Treasures competition invited the public to find new gems in Hubble data. Out of nearly 3,000 submissions, Schmidt took home 3rd place for an image of a newborn star. New research performed by scientists at Curtin University has found evidence that Earth's early continents resulted from being hit by comets as our solar system passed into and out of the spiral arms of the Milky Way galaxy, turning traditional thinking about our planet's formation on its head. Curtin University is the largest university in Western Australia and named after a prime minister. The interesting theory, published in Geology, challenges the existing idea that Earth's crust was solely formed by processes inside our planet. Lead researcher Professor Chris Kirkland said studying minerals in the Earth's crust revealed a rhythm of crust production every 200 million years or so that matched our solar system's transit through areas of the galaxy with a higher density of stars. The solar system orbits around the Milky Way, passing between the spiral arms of the galaxy approximately every 200 million years, he said. From looking at the age and isotopic signature of minerals from both the Pilbara Craton in Western Australia and the North Atlantic Craton in Greenland, we see a similar rhythm of crust production, which coincides with periods during which the solar system journeyed through areas of the galaxy most heavily populated by stars. When passing through regions of higher star density, comets would have been dislodged from the most distant reaches of the solar system, some of which impacted Earth. Increased comet impact would have led to a greater melting of the Earth's surface to produce the buoyant nuclei of the early continents. Linking the formation of continents, the land masses on which we all live, to the passage of the solar system casts a whole new light on the formative history of our planet and its place in the cosmos, he said. Scientists from NASA's Johnson Space Center contributed to the research.
In the next 8 minutes, you'll experience a 25.5-day mission from rollout to recovery. The first integrated flight test of the Orion spacecraft and the Space Launch System rocket launching from the Kennedy Space Center is about to unfold. This is the first of many missions to come that will use the Deep Space Exploration System to prepare our team, our ship, and our astronauts for human operations in deep space. Rollout from the Vehicle Assembly Building signals that launch is near. Sitting atop the mobile launcher, the crawler transporter moves along the crawlerway towards historic Launch Pad 39B at the Kennedy Space Center at a top speed of 1 mile an hour. After traveling over 4 miles, the rocket and the spacecraft climb up a ramp and are positioned over a flame trench. Once in position, the mobile launcher is lowered onto support post and the crawler is rolled away to a safe distance. Final checks are performed at the pad, including crew cabin closeout via the access arm sitting over 300 feet above the surface of the launch pad. The launch date is set, and the teams are prepared for the mission that is about to occur. It's sunrise on launch day. Engineers in the Launch Control Center have already powered up the spacecraft and the rocket and loaded the core stage and upper stage with cryogenic fuel. As launch window open approaches, final checks are performed, and when all systems are go, terminal countdown is initiated. The big physics of launch are about to be put on full demonstration. Umbilical plates weighing hundreds of pounds await their cue to retract to clear the path of the rocket at liftoff, some mounted on arms the size of tractor trailers. The mighty core stage engines are prepared for engine start as they are thermally conditioned for an onrush of cryogenic fuel in the heat of ignition. At T-minus 15 seconds, sound suppression is activated, cascading water into the flame trench to dampen the acoustic shock. And as the core stage engines achieve full throttle, shock diamonds appear. At booster ignition, the flame trench is flooded with fire. At first motion, all umbilical arms are retracted and the rocket clears the tower in just seconds. At liftoff, the vehicle produces 8.8 million pounds of thrust and lofts the vehicle weighing nearly 6 million pounds and standing 32 stories tall to orbit. Propelled by a pair of 5-segment boosters and 4 liquid engines, the rocket achieves maximum dynamic pressure only 90 seconds into the mission, the period of greatest atmospheric force on the structure of the rocket. Thousands will gather in Florida to watch our ship get smaller and leave the Space Coast behind. Approximately 2 minutes into the mission, the boosters will have consumed all of their solid propellant and are safely jettisoned. The rocket will continue on, guiding itself to orbit with magnificent precision. Just 3 minutes into the mission, the service module fairings are jettisoned to lighten the vehicle and expose Orion's solar arrays. Just 40 seconds later, the launch abort system is also jettisoned. It is no longer needed. Orion could safely abort at any time. Once at the desired velocity target, the core stage engines are shut down and the core stage separates. The interim cryo-propulsion stage with Orion will continue to orbit the Earth. Along the way, they will pass through the altitude of the International Space Station at 250 statute miles. During this first orbit, the solar arrays are deployed so that Orion no longer needs battery power. It can now produce its own power. Following solar array deployment, the arrays are positioned into a load-bearing configuration to prepare for the perigee raise maneuver. The raise maneuver will ensure an Earth orbit and use the thrust provided by the interim cryo-propulsion stage. Once the perigee raise maneuver is complete, Orion systems are checked prior to committing to the translunar injection, or TLI maneuver. The TLI maneuver must be successfully completed to depart Earth orbit. The TLI burn is approximately 20 minutes in duration and increases the spacecraft's velocity over 9,000 feet per second, a speed change faster than a high-powered rifle bullet travels. Following TLI, Orion is committed to a lunar trajectory, just 1.5 hours after launch. Once complete, the spacecraft adapter will remain with the interim cryo-propulsion stage, and they will separate from Orion. As Orion departs low Earth orbit, it will fly through the orbital debris field encircling the Earth, past the global positioning navigation satellites, past the communication satellites in geostationary orbit, and through the Van Allen radiation belts, on into the deep space radiation environment. Orion is now entering an outbound coast phase. The spacecraft is uniquely designed to navigate, communicate, and operate in this deep space environment. The outbound coast to the Moon will take approximately 4 days. As Orion approaches the Moon, the service module will be used to perform a critical lunar gravity assist maneuver, allowing the ship to enter a distant retrograde orbit about the Moon. The Moon will get larger and larger in the window, and at closest approach, Orion will be just 62 miles from the surface of the Moon. As the spacecraft flies around the far side of the Moon, we will lose all communication back on Earth, and for a period of time, Orion will be on its own. Mission Control will await acquisition of signal, and as we lock on, a new generation will see their first Earthrise. The spacecraft is now in the distant retrograde orbit, where its systems will be tested in the deep space environment for over a week. Along the way, our ship will travel farther from Earth than any human-capable spacecraft has ever gone. At the farthest point, Orion will be some 1,000 times farther from Earth than the International Space Station, at over 270,000 miles away. Teams in Mission Control Houston and at Naval Base San Diego will prepare for Orion's return home, and the recovery ship will set sail for the recovery zone in the Pacific Ocean. Orion will exit the distant retrograde orbit with another lunar gravity assist and service module engine firing. Along the way, the trajectory will be adjusted to target the Earth's thin atmosphere at over 250,000 miles away and ensure a precision landing in the Pacific Ocean following a direct entry. During the coast home, Orion will maintain the desired tail-to-sun attitude to optimize spacecraft cooling and maximize power production in the deep space environment. Another 4 days return coast home to Earth. As our home planet fills the windows of Orion, an important contribution from our European partners called the service module has done its job. The service module is jettisoned and separates. Following separation, the world's largest heat shield will be oriented into the direction of travel to prepare for entry interface at an altitude of 400,000 feet. At entry interface, Orion will hit the Earth's atmosphere traveling at a speed of 24,500 miles an hour and decelerate at up to 9 times the force of gravity. The heat shield will protect the spacecraft from temperatures half as hot as the surface of the Sun, approaching 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Orion will continue to decelerate, pass through the sound barrier, and announce its arrival to the waiting recovery team with a sonic boom. Following peak heating, a protective thermal cover that sits over the parachutes will be jettisoned. This begins a series of parachute deployments. The drogue chute deployment series is designed to stabilize and slow the spacecraft, and in a period of less than 20 minutes, Orion will slow from a speed of Mach 32 to 0 at splashdown. The 3 main parachutes will deploy and slowly unfurl and suspend the 22,000-pound capsule and allow it to gently descend to the surface of the ocean. After 25.5 days and a total distance traveled exceeding 1.3 million miles, a precision landing within eyesight of the recovery ship. Following splashdown, Orion will remain powered for a period of time as Navy divers approach in small boats from the waiting recovery ship. After a brief inspection for hazards, the divers will hook up tending lines and a tow line. The capsule will be then towed into the well deck of the recovery ship, and once the capsule clears the stern gate, the gate will be closed, the well deck will be drained, and we will bring our ship home.
And that's the way space is today. Until tomorrow, ad in explorata, toward the unknown in the measureless arena of space. Stay tough and competent. Thanks for watching.